The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you can post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. You can also subscribe to my Twitter feeds, which is actually a news feed, to find out what's going on all around the world, all the important stories. No fluff, no puff. We're even covering Michael Jackson as a news story, but not the fluff and puff aspects of it. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show. Folks who are on CRN Digital Talk Radio and on Digital Sounds Barnsley, and at 88.9 in California and Los Angeles, you should download Paltalk, Paltalk. It's a free download, paltalk.com, and jump in there and go to the radio and TV section and click on News Talk Online, and you can participate in the conversation as well. Well, finally, Johnny starts to march home. The withdrawal of the U.S. troops is underway in Iraq, at least from the major cities. It's going to take a while to do so, and the president has acknowledged that there will be an increase in sectarian fighting as the void is created, but it's time, he says, for the Iranians to step up to the plate and be in charge and in control of their own country. I couldn't agree more. But what about what we leave behind? There might have been a time, ladies and gentlemen, where I might have said, who cares? That's an internal issue in Iraq. But now, of course, we've destabilized the situation as it was, at least under the dictator Saddam Hussein. And now there are various factions who are fighting for control. And there were some militias who actually align themselves after fighting the coalition troops with the U.S. troops near the end of this war. And everybody's sitting back wondering where they're going to head. And the second half of this show is going to focus on Iran. And as I reported to you yesterday, in spite of all the internal turmoil in Iran, the Iranians are continuing to train terrorists to cross over the border into Iraq and destabilize the situation there. God forbid we get another theocracy in Iraq to replace the fledgling democracy, replacing the dictatorship that was. Steven Kinzer is with us. He is an award-winning journalist. He has covered more than 50 nations on 5 continents for, among other publications, the New York Times, where he, I think, toiled for the old gray lady for, I believe, about 19 years, and where he was a bureau chief. And so he's well placed to tell us what's up next in Iraq. Stephen, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Great to be with you.
Great to have you
Always
with us. And we love you. That's why we have you back. Let me ask you, Stephen. You know the movie The Candidate, when Robert Redford, a much younger Robert Redford, was running for president of the United States just to spite his father. It was a goof. And somehow along the way, he captured the nation's attention in this movie, and he was elected president of the United States. But he never intended to really be elected. He was just trying to piss off his old man. And at the very end of the movie, he's going to make his acceptance speech, and he pulls his campaign manager into the men's room and shuts the door and turns to his campaign manager and says, "Now what do I do?" Because he had no idea what he would do now that he was elected president of the United States. Now, what do the Iraqis do as the United States troops begin to withdraw?
Well, it's a pretty pitiful story that you just related about the end of that movie, which I do remember, because when it happened in real life to George Bush, he wasn't saying, what do I do now after winning the election? He was saying, what do I do now after he had invaded Iraq? I don't think that he or any of the people around him ever wanted to think about what the consequences of that invasion would be, but now the world is very aware of them. Let me just make a couple of comments about your introduction and your very apt framing of the challenge that we're facing in Iraq now. The first point is that although naturally Americans are encouraged to see our soldiers pulling out of Iraq, particularly those of us who thought they never should have been there, nonetheless, this project of an American withdrawal from Iraq is really not going to be successful over the long term if it's done in isolation. These problems in the Middle East are all tied in together, and trying to resolve one piece without the others, as I think President Obama has now recognized, is not going to work. In particular, the country that has the greatest ability to stabilize Iraq, even more than we do, the country that could even be our ticket out of Iraq if it wanted to, is, of course, Iran. Iraq is a mainly Shiite country. Iran is the Shiite motherland, and many of the Iraqi leaders lived in Iran during their periods of exile under the Saddam Hussein dictatorship. So Iran is a big regional player there. We saw that Iran endorsed the status of forces agreement, which I think was a sign that it also wants a stable Iraq. No country wants to have a nation in turmoil across the border. So engaging with Iran in some way, even if at this point it can't be on global issues and maybe it could just be related to Iraq, could be something very positive for both countries. So that's the first thing I think we ought to bear in mind. If we really want to get out of Iraq in a way that doesn't leave chaos behind, Iran can be a big help to us. The second thing I think that's interesting that's changing in Iraq is something that I don't think many people expected, although it's going in a direction of something that I used to think was a good idea for Iraq. My solution always was that we needed a kind of Saddam light, a kind of harsh, maybe elected dictator who could whip factions into line. And oddly enough, I think Prime Minister Maliki is transforming himself perhaps into that person. Originally, he was put in as a kind of the last man standing, so he staggered in. But now he's taken a lot of steps that shrewd, tough leaders in the Middle East take. He's purged the army, so he's got only officers that are loyal to him. Now he has no danger that there'll be a coup from the army. He's got his own security force, which also functions as a kind of a death squad or enforcement unit when he needs it. So maybe Maliki will be emerging as this kind of